What is up, ladies and gentlemen? It's Scott here and welcome back to FudgeMuppet. Today I'm excited to bring you a brand new Fallout 4 build with a little twist. We've picked up a few simple yet really badass mods to spice things up and really nail this aesthetic. This is the Widow. The Widow is no stranger to suffering and copes with her turmoil with a gun in her hands. The emotional pain can only be countered by vengeance, and she is a relentless killing machine when faced with the people who have wronged her. She isn't one for negotiations and she despises stealth, sickened by the thought of letting her enemies die without seeing who pulled the trigger. This unbeaten killer would give John Wick a run for his money. Thanks to a few choice mods, the Widow's character is mirrored by her aesthetic. Her armor is jet black and menacing, her eyes glow green in the darkness, and with the power of her specialized helmet, she can literally sense the guilty souls of those who she hunts, making for easy pickings when she springs into action with her shotgun. The Widow's shotgun is adorned with a mural of intricate carvings of skulls. It's the hellish visage that acts as a hint of what lies in wait for her foes. The mods you want to get your hands on are called the Widow's Shotgun mod, the Black Widow Armor mod, and on the same page in the mods tab, the Widow Shotgun and Pip-Boy Rig textures. Links to all of these can be found in the description along with timestamps to each section of the video, but with that said, let's kick things off with the Widow's backstory and basic values. The Widow was born in Boston into a seemingly loving family. However, some turn of events beyond her comprehension at the time caused her mother to run away with another man while the Widow was but an infant. I use the term run away, but in actuality she didn't go anywhere until after a divorce settlement. Despite her father's loyalty and despite her mother's extramarital affair with another man, her mother won the settlement with ease. She was granted their home, the majority of their finances, and full custody of the widow. However, her mother had no intention of keeping custody, or the house. She sold the latter and left the widow alone with her heartbroken father. As she grew up, the widow was very close to her father. He provided for her the best as he could, and what little they had was enough for her. She also grew to resent her mother, even though her father tried his best never to speak ill of her. Living with a single parent on the brink of the poverty line, the widow had but one outlet, one escape from her life, and that came in the form of her local firing range. Her uncle ran the range and allowed her to use it for free, teaching her proper technique and safety measures on the house. In her meager day-to-day life, the widow cherished the hours she had spent at the range each day. It was cathartic and oh so therapeutic. She used everything from pistol to rifle to shotgun, from semi-auto to pump action to lever action, and everything in between. She was able to blow off steam and forget about her existence for a while. It was just her weapon, and her target. In school, the widow wasn't interested in creative writing or art or cooking. She elected to study law. Ever since a great injustice had ruined her father's life, she had been fascinated by the field of study, and she wanted to be a catalyst for change. What better way to achieve that than by becoming a lawyer? Her education took her from high school to the Suffolk County School of Law, where she lived on campus. Her time in college allowed her to meet many new people, and she relied on grants to fund her modest but comparatively far more luxurious lifestyle away from home. Despite this, she found herself spending a lot of her time at the shooting range. It was here she met her future love, a man named Nate, and they soon began to date, and the widow felt herself falling for him. However, soon after their relationship began, the widow received a call from her uncle back home. He had gone to visit her father on a Sunday afternoon, only to find him hanging from the rafters in the garage. His depression had never fully subsided since the day his love left him, and living alone without his daughter had been the tipping point. The widow was distraught. She regretted ever leaving home to pursue an education. Thankfully, Nate showed a degree of support and loyalty her father had never experienced from his partner, and he joined her at her father's funeral. It was on that day when she delivered the speech to a few grieving mourners that the widow decided to remain focused on her education and her relationship. She vowed to make the lives of her children perfect. Her children would never experience a broken home. Nate soon left to serve his country, forcing her to wait a little longer before making that dream a reality. During that time, they exchanged letters weekly, and the widow missed Nate immensely. But as usual, she found solace in practicing her marksmanship and studying in the college library. Not too long after completing her studies, Nate returned and they began to raise a family in Sanctuary Hills. Every day, the widow picked up Sean from his crib and whispered to him that he would live a charmed childhood with two loving parents. One day, her whispers were interrupted by a horrifying announcement on the television. The bombs were on their way. Upon waking up from cryo slumber, the widow is absolutely destroyed. She is almost unable to carry herself to the vault entrance. All of her vows and promises had fallen to pieces, withered by time as she was preserved in her frozen hell. She remembers the face of the man who took her son, the man who shot her love. the man who subjected Sean to a life without two loving parents. She will be relentless in the search for her son, stopping at nothing. After coming to terms with reality, she will learn to apply her skills to the wasteland. She would deliver justice to those who wronged her family, and she would arm herself against any who wished to harm her. Her determination is so strong that it breaches into the realms of fury, and she will find herself going to great lengths she didn't know she could. She wants to burn the Institute to the ground as she learns of their involvement in her tragedy. Even if it wasn't any fault of her own, they forced her to break a promise to a young child, but maybe she could rescue him before he grew up completely, giving him back some semblance of his childhood. For this reason, she will join the Brotherhood or the Railroad. They both share her wish to deal with the Institute. The widow's aggression may lead her to favor the Brotherhood, as the Railroad's stealthy approach may severely test her patience. Plus, the ballistic weave isn't important to this build because it comes as an option for this modded armor regardless, but both options are totally viable. When she learns about the man operating the Institute, she will be incredibly conflicted. If you feel compassionate, you could do some of the Institute's quests and maybe try to see things from their perspective, but most likely by the end of the day, she will take the stance that the Institute took her son and turned him into a monster, which makes her hate them even more. She won't be filled with vitriol and hatred towards her son, but she will hate the people who turned him into this man. She will destroy the Institute for what they did and will achieve this with the Brotherhood or the Railroad if you personally prefer. There are also some other quests that fit her role-playing well. The Silver Shroud quest will give her a good outlet to carry out some vigilante justice against criminals. In Far Harbor, if you sided with the Brotherhood in the main story, you'd want to take down Arcadia by notifying the Brotherhood and help the people of Far Harbor, taking out the children of Atom in the process. She'd look pretty badass in the fog with her glowing eyes. If you side with the Railroad, create peace between all the factions, wipe out the Raiders and Nuke World if you want to continue with keeping her sane after a whole experience, but if you want to make her turn dark after the tragedy and the killing of her own son, she could go a bit crazy and join up with the Raiders, becoming their leader and unleashing torture upon others as it was inflicted upon her. Just an idea, not a necessity. We'll leave that decision up to you. At the beginning of the game, the Widow's special stats will be 2 strength, 1 perception, 10 endurance, 1 charisma, 3 intelligence, 10 agility, and 1 luck. The special book under Sean's crib will go into charisma. While perk point investments will improve a couple of her other stats, her greatest strengths lie in her endurance and agility. The Widow's experiences have given her serious mental and physical fortitude, and there's very little that the post-war wasteland can throw at her that she isn't well prepared for. She understands loss and suffering better than most, and it shows in her endurance. Also, her experience handling guns gives her impressive dexterity in combat. She is as agile as she is tough, so when her enemies can manage to land a hit on her, it won't be enough to break her resolve. But with that in mind, let's take a look at the Widow's essential perks. First up, we have Strength, and we will only need 1 perk from this tree. Make sure you get your hands on the Strength bobblehead as early as you can so that you can take all ranks of the Armor perk. With this perk, the Widow will have access to all ranks of armor modifications, meaning that you won't have to wait long before garbing yourself in her modded armor. Next, we have Perception, and this is one of those skills that will improve with time and levels. You want to drop a total of 4 perk points into the base stat, bringing it up to 5 points, and then 6 when you get that bobblehead in the beginning of the game. Next, you'll want the Rifleman perk. Maxing out this perk will make non-auto rifles twice as powerful, ignoring 30% of the target's armor and giving a chance to cripple. Then you have to take the first rank of Night Person. As you can tell from the aesthetic, the Widow will operate best in the darkness, instilling fear in her foes before she even pulls out her weapon. With this, you gain 2 additional points of intelligence and perception between 6 PM and 6 AM. The main reason we want this Night Person perk is so we can get a really cool modification on our helmet. You can see now that with even 1 point of perception at the start of the game, perception will soon become one of your best stats. Now we have endurance, and the base stat will be the most important part of this. The only perk you will need from this tree is Adamantium Skeleton. With all 3 levels, limb damage will be removed entirely. Just like with Endurance, Charisma will only require us to take 1 perk, and that is Lone Wanderer. Once you have the bobblehead and the special book, you can take this perk. And fully optimized, it will grant you 100 extra carry weight, you'll take 30% less damage, you'll deal 25% more damage, and have an additional 25 action points. Having points in this stat is pretty much irrelevant. Does the Widow seem like the kind of person who wants to make friends after leaving the vault? From the intelligence stat line, take the first 2 ranks of medic. This will make Stimpack and Radaway 60% more effective. Then with all ranks of gun nut, you'll be able to turn your shotgun into a souped up killing machine. We'll want to take a total of 3 perks from the agility skill tree. Despite having 10 points in the stat, the Widow will not be interested in taking a stealthy approach. She doesn't want to wait for a vengeance, and she wants her enemies to know who is about to kill them. Nevertheless, there will be some useful perks to take. The first is Action Girl, and with all 3 levels, AP will regenerate 75% faster, then max out moving target to make yourself much more evasive. With this, you'll be rewarded for sprinting. You will gain plus 50 damage resistance and plus 50 energy resistance when sprinting, and sprinting will cost 50% fewer action points. And finally, with all levels of quick hands, you'll be able to reload fast and at no AP cost. Plus, you'll have an extra 10 base action points to spend. They say luck comes to those who wait, but the Widow doesn't believe such superstitions. She is quick and unrelenting in combat, and it pays off both in her blood shedding abilities and her loot acquisition. First, drop a perk point into the stat, then max out both Fortune Finder and Scrounger. With Fortune Finder, you'll find considerably more caps in containers. You'll also have the fun chance to make an enemy explode in a fountain of caps when killed. Similarly, Scrounger will allow you to find much more ammo in containers, and you'll have the chance to gain ammo when firing the last round in your magazine. And this happens a lot considering that we are wielding a double barrel shotgun that needs to be reloaded every 2 shots. Finally, take the perk that is a killer's best friend. With Bloody Mess, battering your foes with shotgun blasts will be all the more satisfying. Enemies will explode upon death, often causing a chain reaction with nearby enemies, and on top of that, you'll have a 15% handy bonus to all damage dealt in combat. So with that in mind, the Widow's playstyle is pretty straightforward. The build is about having the most fun while getting satisfying kill after satisfying kill. You should relish in every enemy killed, as the Widow's thirst for vengeance is unquenchable. You want to move constantly, dealing with foes as fast as you possibly can, getting up in their face right with that shotgun. The faster you move, the more you'll be rewarded, taking less damage in the process. At the end of the game, with all bobbleheads, the special book, and any perk point investments but no gear, the Widow special stats will be 3 strength, 6 perception, 11 endurance, 3 charisma, 4 intelligence, 11 agility, and 3 luck. On top of this, you'll have gear that gives you plus 2 perception and plus 2 endurance, and some perks will increase your stats even further, like Night Person giving you plus 2 perception and intelligence after nightfall. The Widow will be kitted out in the badass modded attire aptly named the Black Widow armor. You'll want the ultralight build with Ballistic Weave Mark 5 and Adaptive Ballistic Weave on. This armor increases your damage resistance as your health decreases, so don't be afraid to hold off on those Stimpaks. On her head, she'll wear the Black Widow hood, which grants plus 2 perception and looks incredible. Use the ultralight build with the green eye color and Underworld Vision Dark. This means that the souls of enemies will be highlighted, and all who are highlighted are 50% more susceptible to damage. As for a weapon, she'll use the modded Widow shotgun, upgraded with the calibrated powerful receiver, the full stock, muzzle, brake, slug ammo, and zoom set to 3. This allows you to zoom in more, and your accuracy will be slightly increased while doing so. Keep in mind that you can use the incendiary ammo if you're inclined to set your enemies on fire when you strike in the dead of night, and all of these mods and attachments are all our personal preferences, but you can make changes to the zoom, the rounds, or whatever you see fit. The Widow absolutely will not be traveling with companions. She lost her life companion in Vault 111, and anyone else would get in the way. The Lone Wanderer perk takes priority here. You could dabble in companions if you badly want companion perks, but again, they're not necessary to the build, and you'll want to ditch them once you gain the perk if you go down that road. Once again, the Widow is focused on her own desire for revenge, so please to help build settlements will bore her to death. The Widow is mobile in combat and mobile out of combat, never settling in one spot, constantly on the move like a nomad. And there you have it, guys. Subscribe to FudgeMuppet for more Fallout 4 builds in the future, and if you enjoyed the video, maybe give it a like. Don't forget the timestamps for all of your video navigation needs can be found in the description just below, along with links to all of the mods we used. Thanks so much for watching, guys. My name is Scott, and I'll see you in the next one.